Prime Minister pointing out it wasn't just Lucy Letby, it was Thomas Cashman, who was the killer of Olivia Pratt-Corbell, also refusing to attend his sentencing.
And he's not the only one. Indeed, the clamour for this change in the law has been coming for at least a year, because before that case, the Corbell case, there was the case of Jordan McSweeney, who sexually assaulted and murdered Zara Alina. That was in East London earlier. The Prime Minister first promised this back in July last year, when he was in the contest for the Tory leadership with Liz Truss. And then it's been promised and promised and promised for months and months. Dominic Raab, the former Justice Secretary, has just tweeted in the last few minutes that he promised this back in April. Well, he did, but the government, it's taken until now for action. Now, this is not going to come until the King's Speech, which is the 7th of November. Legislation coming then, but there's no guarantee that it'll go through and become law before the general election, although the government will obviously want it to, and presumably the opposition will back it. But what we do have that's new today is some of the detail, Ian, as to how the government intends to make this work. Now, what the government is announcing is that there'll be a new power for judges to order an offender to attend their hearings and make it clear that force can be used to make sure this happens. The power of custody officers to use reasonable force to make criminals appear in the dock, or via video link. Now, video link was a proposal made after the Letby verdicts here on Sky News by the former Justice Secretary, Sir Robert Buckland, and clearly that has been taken up by the government. That'll be enshrined in law, meaning every effort will be made for victims and their families to see justice delivered, the government says in its announcement. Now, if a criminal continues to resist attending their sentencing despite a judge's order, they will face an extra 2 years behind bars. This new penalty will apply in cases where the maximum sentence is life imprisonment, including sexual or violent crimes like murder, rape and grievous bodily harm with intent. Now, there will be plenty of MPs who say the government's been dragging its feet here, because after the Corbell case, a Merseyside MP, that was Ian Byrne, pressed Alex Chalk, the Justice Secretary, to bring in this law in a bill currently going through Parliament. The Victims and Prisoners Bills currently in the House of Lords. But the government seems to have rejected that option, despite others like Sir Robert Buckland backing that, and it will be in the King's Speech. So it's going to be some time. The Prime Minister, as well as his tweet, has said this in the government's announcements. It's unacceptable that some of the country's most horrendous criminals have refused to face their victims in court. They cannot and shouldn't be allowed to take the coward's way out. That's why we're giving judges the power to order vile offenders to attend their sentencing hearings, with those who refuse being forced into the dock or spending longer behind bars. But it's worth pointing out that Mr. Sunak first promised this in a tweet on the 19th of July last year. As PM, I will do everything possible to make sure victims have the chance to look their perpetrator in the eye and witness justice being served. Well, the government's finally going to do it. Critics will say they're taking their time over this, and perhaps it's some critics will say it's more urgent than waiting for the King's Speech and legislation, not until introducing legislation after November the 7th, and it'll be next year before this comes into force.
OK, thanks, John.